All right, hello, and this is the Pro Wrestling Program. My name is Kyle, and today we're reviewing AEW's Dynamite from November 22nd, 2023 in Chicago, and this is their first show since their pay-per-view on Saturday, Full Gear, which I was kind of lukewarm on. It wasn't really the greatest show for me. I feel like it was probably actually their worst pay-per-view that I've seen so far. And if you like death matches, though, that completely changes the narrative, as you would enjoy that pay-per-view quite a bit more. I don't, so I really only enjoyed two of the matches that they had on that pay-per-view, quite enjoyed two of the matches. But with this episode of Dynamite, I feel like this was a solid episode. From the last few weeks that I've been reviewing, I enjoyed this one quite a bit more. There are still some negatives here and there, but for the most part, a solid show from top to bottom. And I'm actually enjoying and excited for the Continental Tournament. I thought when it was first announced, yes, it is just a cheaper it is Tony's cheaper version of New Japan Pro Wrestling's G1 tournament, which just produces all incredible matches and matchups, and it's this massive tournament in New Japan Pro Wrestling. I don't think we're going to get that feeling at all here, but this is still moving in the right direction because AEW is still about matchups. That's kind of what they're trying to sell, is they're going to have quality wrestling matches. And what I feel is one of the weaker parts of AEW is that you can totally do that, but you need to have a reason to care at that same point in time. So you need storylines, you need angles, you need promos, you need everything that is sports entertainment of wrestling to actually sell the wrestling match, which AEW can totally produce, but they need those other parts for us to care. And generally on these TV shows, they're just having matches with no real heat. Yes, it could be faces versus heels or a heel versus face, whatever, teams or singles, it doesn't matter. But it's very rare that there's actually a feud ongoing unless they're actually having that match on the TV show. But a lot of the times it's just a single wrestler versus a single wrestler and nothing really, it's just a match. They can get away with that with the tournament. So at least there's a purpose for these people wrestling, even though there's not necessarily a feud or an angle that's going on with these characters. And we might eventually start seeing, because it's a tournament, some people getting involved and starting a feud because they screw somebody over during this tournament. That could lead to something. So I'm looking forward to it, and I'm actually enjoying it quite a bit. So let's start this off with the review for the show. We start off the show with Swerve Strickland versus Jay Lethal, a match that I was very much looking forward to, but not a few days after that insane death match that Swerve had. That is probably the biggest problem with this show. There's hardly any Full Gear fallout. It's like the pay-per-view happened, and well, that's done. Let's not care about that anymore at all. They had the craziest death match on a national show, and Swerve is wrestling the next night with a bandaged shoulder. Or not the next night, a few nights afterwards. Why didn't he come out looking like he just went through war? I know that he won the match at the pay-per-view. I don't care. He went through hell for half an hour. He should not have been wrestling this week. He should have been wrestling next week. I think that they're kind of going back and forth between Collision and Dynamite. They could have at least waited until Collision to have Swerve wrestling. I don't know. I just don't think it was a good idea. But the match itself was solid, and at least Swerve was selling his shoulder quite a bit throughout the match, and Lethal was attacking it. So I did enjoy that. The match itself, if you take the aspect of Swerve just going through hell and being able to wrestle tonight and win the match, that's another thing too. I think that's this tournament to me is going to be Swerve Strickland versus Bryan Danielson. I think that that's going to be the winners of both the brackets, and I think that that's the whole point is actually to put over Swerve. I think that's a good idea. Nothing wrong with that. He's been on fire lately. They're actually able to make a star out of something, which is something that AEW I feel has a hard time with. They did an incredible job with MJF, and now they're kind of losing it a little bit because he was better as a heel. For some reason, the best friend stuff with Adam Cole worked in the summer, but since then I feel like it's lost a little bit of steam. Let's just say. AEW on a whole has lost a little bit of steam since then. Quite a bit more, actually. But either way, this match was good. It was the match of the night for me. 3.25, maybe even 3.5 stars. It was a little bit slower in certain aspects, like the selling of them, like some of the moves that they would hit were a little bit slower than I was expecting. And it's not what I'm used to for AEW, first of all, but at the same time, Jay Lethal is a good in-ring general. I trust what he does. Swerve's offense is actually really good, but I just wish that he would have been selling. He did a good job with the shoulder, like I said, but I wish he would have sold a little bit more that he went through hell and he's trying to keep Lethal at bay with whatever means necessary without having to actually engage too much in a match and do some really fancy moves, which look nice, but don't make too much sense considering he was in the death match. But enough about that. What I do like is that he at least did go for Lethal's leg. So we had a lot of limb work, which in my mind is always just great. I love that. And it actually ended the match because Lethal was selling it. He went, he had knocked down Swerve, I believe. He went on the ropes, jumped back. Swerve smacked his leg as he was upside down, basically, and that allowed him to go for his finisher, get the 1, 2, 3. 3 points for Swerve. Very good stuff. I just wish that we hadn't seen Swerve wrestle this week. Granted, that was the best match of the night, so I can't really complain too much in that regard. I just really like the idea of, if somebody has a crazy match, sell it well. If you just had a pay-per-view, have a fallout. That's because then what's the point in watching the pay-per-view if you're not really going to talk about the ramifications of that pay-per-view too much on the next show? They did a little bit here, which is coming up in a second. But for the most part, we didn't really get too much fallout. And I know that that's not AEW's strength, but I feel like that's what's holding them back. All right, so then we had Orange Cassidy backstage with the other two goofuses. Actually, Shibata is not a goofus. Shibata, I used to love Shibata before he got injured and then he had to come back. I'm so surprised that he's back. I thought he was done completely. But him before his injury that kept him off the shelves for a while was excellent. He could have been so big in New Japan Pro Wrestling. It's too bad that he had gotten injured. I'm also just very happy that he is actually back to wrestling. So either way, Renee's talking about Orange Cassidy and his title defense, and then they say that they have trios action later tonight with himself, Hook, and Shibata. And Orange Cassidy was going to talk, but Yuta comes in, makes fun of the three of them, basically, and specifically Shibata, and then eventually Orange says, I have an announcement to make. Can I make it? And Renee says, we're out of time. And just don't let Orange talk. Like that, it's such a weird, awkward thing. Anyway, we move on from there to a surprise segment because it wasn't announced, but Better Than You Baby comes out. So MJF with Adam Cole in tow. The pop, I feel, should have been louder here. And I get that, like, when you're looking at the audience, it's like anything above, like in the top rows, there's nobody there. It's completely dark. I assume they never showed the hard cam side. And I know that there's a joke that, what's the hard cam? So that's where it has to be. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to take up the whole left side of the building. It never has to be that bad. Anyway. But you can still clearly see it, and you can feel it because the crowd wasn't as necessarily engaged because there's not as many people there. And it does hurt because if you go to a show and it looks sold out completely with the amount of people that they had, a few thousand, I don't know how many it was, but maybe 3,000, maybe even 4,000. I can't tell, and I didn't look it up. But if you put that in a sold out building, as in there's no other room, that crowd will be alive. It'll sound so much better. But if I go to a show and half the people aren't there, and I can see that clearly in the audience, it's going to make me not be as excited. You want to feel the atmosphere. You want it to feel alive. If half the arena is empty seats, that's not a good atmosphere. It makes a difference. I really hope that Tony realizes that he can't pull the numbers that he used to, and that's okay. Yes, it is somewhat of a failure, but that happens with every wrestling company. WWE has gone through it numerous times throughout its entire existence. So there's nothing wrong with WCW. Every company goes through that. So Just because WWE is hot right now doesn't mean that AEW has to try to compete with that, with booking these big arenas. I hope that Tony realizes that, starts booking smaller arenas. If he goes for something that's 5,000 and they get 4,000, it's not as bad. If just start going anyway. Anyway, let's move on to this segment, because I enjoyed this segment because we got some AEW Full Gear fallout. That's what I want. So they come out. And then MJF puts over Jay White, actually, while also hyping himself up. I like that. I like that he mentioned that Jay White was undefeated until MJF, and that he actually gave props to Jay White. I like that. Then we had MJF, he's great on the mic. He says that sometimes he can be a little bit too humble. So if the crowd allows him, he'd like to hype himself up a little bit more even. And he wants to talk to Adam Cole for being his friend and helping him out. And then Cole wants to announce that, even though his leg is still really messed up, and that he can't walk, let alone wrestle. And then I'm like, why was this the angle that they pushed at Full Gear? He's literally saying he can't even walk, let alone wrestle right now, but he was going to be the sub for MJF. The logic sometimes in this show is so incredibly dumb. There's nobody there that is thinking, this is dumb, what we're saying. We can have one or the other. You can't have Adam Cole willing to sub for MJF and everybody saying MJF shouldn't wrestle, but let Cole, the guy that's actually injured, that he can't even walk, is allowed to wrestle, and then have them talk about this afterwards. Oh, jeez. Anyway, he says that Adam is worried about MJF, and it's because it feels like he has everybody after him, and Cole can't be at his side to save him. He can't be there to guard him right now. He's got Wardlow, he's got the Devil guy. MJF says, you know what? Once I get my hands on that guy that stole my mask, I'm just gonna beat the crap out of him. The Devil comes on, laughs. And then we get Samoa Joe coming out. Joe also cut a pretty good promo here too. And I also just really like that Joe is being pushed. This is what I like. I don't think that he's going to be the one that beats MJF. Would love it. Absolutely love it if he does. I don't feel he's got the right amount of steam just yet. They're getting there. And he's great. He's actually solid on the mic. And he looks like a legitimate world title contender. He looks the part. The booking of Joe just needs to be a little bit stronger for me to really feel like maybe he could be a threat to MJF. It all depends on if MJF has signed also with AEW, if he's going to sign with them come January 1st. That's going to be the interesting part. It's entirely possible that he already has. I don't think he has, but it's possible that he has already signed, and they're just kind of continuing this as a storyline. So either way, this is also where I realized, specifically this part, that AEW needs better camera guys. This should have felt like a really big moment, and WWE is able to make these moments with just the positioning of their cameras feel like a big moment. There's only so much that the talent can do themselves. And I also think that if you had a little bit more structure, where the whole point of NXT is that you learn, sometimes even for guys that have been there for a long time or have been wrestling for a very long time, that ended up going there, Robert Roode, Samoa Joe, like clearly they had been on TNA, they had been like on TV. Drew McIntyre when he came back, they went to NXT to kind of learn specifically where to look when those cameras are on you. So it's not just the talent can talk and wrestle, but to understand where those cameras are going to be, you need to have a good mind in the background, kind of guiding everybody, a good director for that. I just really felt like I noticed it a lot during this segment, because I feel like it was a good enough promo between Adam Cole, MJF, and Samoa Joe, but it was lacking in the department of with the camera direction. So either way, we get MJF. He said Joe wants to talk about his title shot. MJF said something and they blurred it, so I wasn't able to read his lips, but he basically said something that was a swear. Joe goes to attack him. Adam begs for Joe not to attack MJF, and let him talk to him to talk some sense into him. Adam cuts a great promo on, that's the old Max that would have said this and not owned up to the promise of letting Joe have a title shot. That's the old MJF. That's not who you are now, Max. The person that you are now, the reason why everybody likes you isn't because you have good matches, isn't because you're the world champion, isn't because that you can cut an excellent promo. It's because that when you say something, you keep your word. Well done. Max finally says, I agree. If you want this world title shot, let's have it right here, right now. Joe laughs. He says, there's no way in hell. And the reasoning why Joe doesn't want to have the match right now was perfect. He said, I'm the bad guy. And I was like, don't call yourself the bad guy unless it's the gimmick of Scott Hall, for example, which works. But don't admit that you're the heel. That's a little bit too fourth wall building. There's certain characters that can get away with it, but Joe isn't one of them. Joe doesn't have to pander to the crowd in that way. So he says that I don't want to fight right now because I want MJF at 100%. I don't want to give you an excuse so that you can go cry afterwards and say that I wasn't cleared to wrestle, I wasn't at 100%, and have a bunch of excuses. I want MJF at 100% and I want him at World's End. I want him at the pay-per-view. Well said. Makes sense. And it also can lead to some interesting aspects where potentially MJF has everybody after him, right? Joe can now come out to save MJF if MJF looks like he's going to get injured or attacked because Joe wants him at 100%. This could be very interesting. This could be well done. I'm commending and I'm hoping that AEW and Tony realizes this, that you can make some good stuff out of this in the next little while. And it works. You got two top guys here. MJF and Joe are freaking awesome. I'm enjoying this. Where was I here? Oh, and then also Max said that, at one point he does say that you wouldn't be the first legend that I beat here in Chicago. That's when right before he had offered the match. But either way, Joe doesn't want any excuses. And MJF continues on with the promo, accepts that, I think he accepted the World's End match. And he also said, when he cut the promo, the fans kind of booed him when he said that, you're not the first legend that I beat in Chicago. And as MJF goes on, he's like, first of all, I love Chicago deep dish, so calm down, okay? That was good. Next up, we had the trios match. Orange Cassidy, Hook, Shibata versus Jake Hager, Matt Menard, and Parker, the previous people that were in the Jericho Club. They need to kind of create I think that I'm actually kind of down with this. Matt Menard can cut a good promo. He's all right. I don't really care for Parker. Jake Hager he's a solid wrestler. Not necessarily a good personality, but he's a solid wrestler. And I think that they could actually do something with this as, contenders for the trios titles, something like that. Maybe tag titles for Jake Hager and Matt Menard. I think that they want to push Parker too. So trios would, I think, work a little bit better. I don't expect them to be top acts, but mid-card, I think that they can actually tear it up quite a bit. Orange Cassidy comes out and he announces his surprise for Thanksgiving, which is Danhausen. The crowd goes absolutely crazy. And as much as I generally say that I hate Orange Cassidy, and I still do, and I don't like comedy in wrestling when they're pushed as the top of the card, and when it's too silly, I don't like it. I love Danhausen. I can't get enough of this ridiculously silly gimmick. I can't. I laugh, I smirk, I enjoy Danhausen. I feel so guilty and dirty saying that, but he makes my day. I don't want him to be part of Orange Cassidy because I think Orange Cassidy is just a horrible, horrible wrestler. I can't stand Orange Cassidy, but I love Danhausen. So either way, I was quite excited. Very nice, very, very evil. I'm all for this. And the thing is, too, is that Danhausen generally isn't pushed as the main guy. Orange Cassidy is, which is unfortunate. He beat Moxley. If Danhausen beats Moxley, It wouldn't make sense. Can't lie and say that wouldn't make me happy though, deep down. But I'd be like, no, it's too wrong. It's too wrong. Anyway, enough about that. We had the match. Shibata was the only person on the Orange Cassidy and Hook team that actually made sense during this match. Like, he was the only one that actually seemed like a threat to Hager, Menard, and Parker. They were doing a good job beating down on Hook. The match itself was just, as I would expect. The best part was when Danhausen, all three of them were in the ring, like the heels. Danhausen got up on the ring and showed the purple hat from Hager. Hager runs out and then Danhausen curses him. It's so stupid. It's so stupid. It's so stupid. But these aren't necessarily top talent people, especially with the way that they've been booked in the last little while. These guys are not top guys, which is where you're allowed to kind of get away with this kind of stuff. Orange Cassidy is still an idiot, but anyway. And then eventually that allowed for, I think, Hook and Shibata to go for some submissions on, I think it was Parker and Menard. I think either way, it was a double thing. They won the match. Moving on. Then we got a great Christian promo. For the most part, there's a little bit here near the end that I'm like, I think we're overbooking this just a bit here, which is, I want to say that I'm happy that AEW is getting promos. I'm never going to be upset about a Christian promo ever. The MJF part, to me, the best parts of the show were by far Swerve and Lethal, even though it didn't make any sense that Swerve was wrestling. The Better Than You Bebe and Samoa Joe interaction, and the this part right here with Christian. Granted, this one also had a few things that I didn't think it was great, but we'll get into that. So he says that Nick Wayne didn't lose the match. Here's the thing. I would never care about Nick Wayne. Ever. But Christian is making me start to actually care for him. AEW is doing something right. Nick Wayne we should not be caring about at all. I'm starting to care for him. Wild. But anyway, Christian says that Nick didn't lose the match. Luchasaurus lost the match. So Christian tells Luchasaurus to get down on one knee so that he can fix this, as he is going to... Luchasaurus, the name, it just makes him think of the loss, and he's going to change him into the Punisher, the Executioner, Kill Switch. Kind of corny, but okay, the promo is nice. Then Christian looks over to Nick, and Nick goes down on one knee, and Christian says, get up on your 2 feet. Don't ever get down on your knees. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. I see myself in you. I love you. You are the son that I never had. And he dubs that Nick Wayne is the prodigy Nick Wayne. Great stuff. Great stuff. Christian just and the crowd is really eating this up too. They're not too like they couldn't be too loud because of the amount of people that were there, or the crowd itself just wasn't very loud. But the loudest that they were was Danhausen, and probably throughout this, and maybe the main event too, which we'll get to. Then Nick's mom comes out, and Christian just goes into it and says that, it's good that his father's dead, as he just goes into his normal shtick. But then he says that you needed to provide for Nick, and you couldn't even do that. You work at was a waitress and making $40,000 a year. That was horrible for Nick. It's just, if that's the truth, and that's what she's actually like, I feel so bad that hopefully Tony is giving her a lot of money to do this. I hope it's just a story and that's not actually true, but if Tony's paying her a lot of money to be on here and to go through this kind of embarrassment to a degree, if she's okay with it, then, and she's getting a good payday for this, I'm okay with it. But anyway, so he starts going off on the mother, and then he tells her to go, get out of here, go punch your card. Your shift is about to start at Denny's. His lines are just so brutal. And then Luchasaurus, Kill Switch, whatever you want to call him, gets in the way. And then they knock down, I can't remember, they knock down the mother, and then Christian gets Nick to go get the steel chairs, and they're going to do a concerto to her. Edge comes out, and then they have like a quick brawl. He spears Nick Wayne. Luchasaurus kind of gets out of the ring. Christian runs back into the ring to look at Edge, And then Luchasaurus, it looked like Christian was about to get ready, but Luchasaurus pulls him back, and then Christian is like so thankful that he pulled him away. And then Edge spears Nick Wayne. Nick Wayne's mother is still in the ring. And then Edge goes and does a concerto on Nick in front of the mother. And I'm like, that's not very babyface-like. That's the only part here that was like, I get that you're attacking Nick, but I think a spear would have been sufficient without having to kill the guy in front of his mom. He came out to save the mother, and he just concertoed her son, her 18-year-old baby boy. Like, whoa, that's way more heelish than anything. Just something, that's the only part that about this segment that I didn't enjoy. And the fact that like the mother is having to go through all of this and take the abusement from Christian cutting a promo. If she's totally cool with it, if she's like, no, this is freaking awesome. This is like, my son is a wrestler. He's on TV. I'm getting paid for this. This is, to me, is fun. I'm all for it. If she's cool with it and Nick's cool with it, then I can't complain at all. But the part about Edge basically doing a heelish move I didn't like. Then we got another match here for the Continental Tournament. Jay White versus Roosh. I don't like, this was an okay match. Nothing amazing. Jay White was definitely better when he was on the offense. And I don't like that Jay White had to use a low blow behind the ref's back to get the win. Because I don't think that he's basically undefeated. He was just in a world title match against MJF. I think beating Roosh without any shenanigans would have been fine. You shouldn't be, you can do these things sometimes to save somebody, to make them not look as weak, but against Jay White, who's up here, and Roosh, who's probably down here, you don't have to do that. I just felt that was kind of weird. We had the triple threat women's match, blah, blah, blah. Sky Blue won. Nothing to talk about there. We had Wardlow waiting in the background with Renee, and she says, okay, so you want to go for MJF, but like, what are you waiting for? And then he says that the world doesn't revolve around MJF. Somebody, I don't even know who the guy is. Some jobber shows up and says, I know what you're doing. It's the same thing I did with Darby. Wardlow headbutts him, I think, and I don't have to listen to you, and walks off. Wardlow, there's no steam here. There's no heat. Nobody cares about this. Wardlow is so far down the totem pole now because he's been gone for so long, and he just sounds like a whiny bitch. I don't care. Hopefully they can turn this around. I do like the idea of everybody going after MJF. I just feel like Wardlow, there's no heat there. Then we got Moxley versus Mark Briscoe in the main event, once again for the Continental Tournament main event. It was a pretty solid match. They wrestled a good back and forth match that I enjoyed. I didn't expect this. Mark Briscoe to me is better as a tag team partner. Moxley isn't my favorite singles wrestler or any wrestler at all, but they had a good back and forth match that felt like a proper main event, like a proper match between two guys, two baby faces, trying to win a tournament or trying to get points in a tournament. I like this. 3 stars. I have to say that it was pretty good. They shook hands at the end. Well done. Kind of a little bit lackluster, I would say, a bit. Like, by far, this show wasn't necessarily must-see, other than, well, but it wasn't must-see, but they had a lot of things right. And there was a lot of solid stuff here. And the thing, too, is that a lot of these matches weren't big matches for the tournament. We kind of got rid of the smaller matches to a degree, because the big thing, the money matches for this bracket is Moxley, Swerve, Moxley, Jay White, Swerve. Those are the main ones, because that's going to be interesting to see who wins. I think it's going to be Swerve. It'll be interesting to see how we get there, and by far those are the big matches. So I'm kind of enjoying it, and I think that as the weeks progress, we're going to get slowly bigger matches as they're starting to go through the tournament. We're starting to see the points kind of accumulate, and I have to say I'm looking forward to it. So not a bad episode of Dynamite. Still some things that make absolutely no sense, but a lot of things that they're doing right that they normally don't do. So I got to give them props. Let me know in the comments below what you thought about this. And you have been bearded in. Beardage.